Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Furlong, and today we're going to get down into the nitty-gritty of cell respiration. Oh, I can't wait. In the last video, we looked at a quick overview of this process of cell respiration. And if you recall, we said that there were three stages to it: glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and electron transport. We're going to, as we go through this process, be filling out this table. If you need to copy this down, go ahead and pause the video and do so. You may already have this table, and we're simply going to be filling this out as we go through each of the different stages of cell respiration. Now real quick, if you take a look between glycolysis and the Krebs cycle, there's something called the intermediate step. It's technically not a stage of cell respiration, but there's a couple of reactions that happen, so we still talk about what's happening there. We're going to get started with glycolysis. Now I want you to notice that we have a 6-carbon molecule here. This is glucose. And what I'm not showing here are all the hydrogens and oxygens that would be on there. Remember, there's 12 hydrogens and 6 more oxygens. We're just going to focus on those 6 carbons. Each of these arrows that you see, such as right here and so on, each one of those is a chemical reaction that's taking place, and they're going to have enzymes that are going to catalyze those reactions. That glucose molecule is going to undergo a reaction. Now, like with all reactions, an ATP is going to be used up in this, forming an ADP molecule. It's going to undergo a couple more reactions, and another ATP is going to be used up, forming ADP. So here we're supposed to be generating ATPs, and we've already used up 2 of them. In another reaction, that 6-carbon glucose molecule is going to be split into 2 3-carbon molecules. They're going to undergo a series of reactions, and an NAD plus molecule is going to form NADH, and 2 ADPs are going to form into 2 ATPs. Now, because there's 2 of these 3-carbon molecules, we actually get 4 ATPs. The NADH molecules that you see here are related to, they might sound familiar to you, NADPH, right, which is in photosynthesis. They're very similar. They're taking a little bit of energy away from the glucose molecule, and they're going to be transferring it over to electron transport. So we need to keep a close eye on these NADHs. Right? And the end result is going to be 2 molecules of an acid called pyruvate, which is Pyruvate. So if you go back to your table, you can see that although we made 4 ATPs, we used up 2 of them, so our net gain is 2. We gained 2 NADHs. We made 0 waters, no carbon dioxide, and no FADH2s. Now the pyruvate is going to go into this intermediate step. So this is our pyruvate to start with. It's going to undergo a series of 3 reactions. In this reaction, a carbon dioxide is going to be released, and we'll eventually be exhaling that out. Now we have a 2-carbon molecule. Another reaction takes place, and a water molecule is released. Along comes another NAD plus forming NADH, and we end up with a molecule called acetate. So we have 2 acetate molecules. Here an enzyme is going to come along. This enzyme is called Coenzyme A, or CoA for short. When acetate and the Coenzyme A form, we have something called acetyl-CoA. So let's take a look at what was made here then. No ATPs were made, but we ended up making 2 carbon dioxides, 2 waters, 2 NADHs, and no FADH2s. The 2 acetyl-CoAs are now going to go into the matrix of the mitochondria, where they will carry out this process of the Krebs cycle. So here's our acetyl-CoA. There we go, spell that right. And here we have a 4-carbon molecule called oxaloacetate. Now that's going to combine with the acetate, forming a 6-carbon molecule called citric acid. Now I bring that up because the Krebs cycle is also known as the citric acid cycle. So let's take a look at what's happening to the citric acid. It's going to undergo a series of reactions, and an NAD plus is going to form an NADH, and then another carbon dioxide in a different reaction is going to be released. Now we have a 5-carbon molecule. It's going to undergo a series of reactions. Another NAD plus is going to steal a little bit more energy away, along with some hydrogens and electrons. Another carbon dioxide is released. Now we have a 4-carbon molecule called ketoglutarate. Not a big deal that you know that, but eventually that ketoglutarate is going to rearrange itself back into oxaloacetate so this process can start all over again. All right, so let's take a look at some more reactions. As this 4-carbon molecule is moving around, an ADP will form an ATP, and FAD plus is going to form an FADH2 molecule, and another NAD plus is going to form NADH. Again, both the NADH and the FADH2s are stealing hydrogens and electrons and a little bit of energy away, and taking that over to the electron transport. Let's take a look at what we've made here. We have 3 NADHs, 2 carbon dioxides, 1 ATP, and 1 FADH2. But remember, that was only from 1 acetate. There was 2 made at the end of the intermediate step. So that means 1 goes through the Krebs cycle, produces those substances, and the second one goes through and produces those substances as well. So that means our net gain is 6 NADHs, 4 carbon dioxides, 2 ATPs, 2 FADH2s, and still no water. We've only netted 4 ATPs at this point. Remember, we're going to get 36 ATPs eventually. But we have all these energy-carrying molecules, these NADHs and these FADH2s, and they're all heading over to the cristae, and here's where we're going to see our ATPs being made. The last stage is electron transport. Here, all those NADHs and FADH2s are going to be making their way to the cristae. So let's look at the NADHs. They're going to drop off some electrons and hydrogen ions, and those electrons are going to be ending up in this electron transport system where they're going to be moved all the way through this electron transport chain, a lot like what we saw in photosynthesis in the light reactions. Now what happens is that flow of electrons, again, it's kind of like electricity. That's going to cause these hydrogen ions to move into that intermembrane space, that area between the outer and the inner membrane. FADH2s will come along and drop off some of their electrons and hydrogens, and they will also be able to move through the electron transport system as well. Right, now notice they're not traveling as far, but they're going to push some hydrogens into that intermembrane space. So notice what's happening here. In that intermembrane space, we're getting all of these hydrogen ions building up, and there's very few out here in the matrix. We're getting a higher concentration in that intermembrane space versus out into the matrix. Well, those hydrogen ions are then going to be able to move through the ATP synthetase enzyme, which gives it a little bit of energy, enough energy so that an ADP can add a phosphate on to become ATP. Now, how much energy are we really getting? For every 1 NADH, we get enough energy to make 3 ATPs. For every 1 FADH2, we get enough energy to make 2 ATPs. All right, now, without getting into real specifics here, the 2 NADHs that were made in glycolysis, they're out in the mitochondria. We only actually net 2 ATPs because it takes some energy to get them in. Anyways, If we add up how many NADHs and FADH2s we made up to this point, and we multiply it by how many ATPs they each make, we get a grand total of 32 ATPs made in electron transport. But we're not done yet. We have all of these electrons building up. We have to have a place for them to go. But we also have these hydrogen ions that are moving through the ATP synthetase enzyme. Well, this is where oxygen comes in. Oxygen that we breathe combines with the electrons and the hydrogens and forms water. Another byproduct of cell respiration. And in fact, that reaction is the only reason why we breathe in oxygen. And think about how vital that is. We can't go more than a few minutes without oxygen. And it's for that one purpose, to take electrons and hydrogens to form a water molecule. I mean, think about it. The air that you just inhaled in just a couple of minutes are going to be in your mitochondria accepting those hydrogens and those electrons. And the carbon dioxide that you just exhaled, that just came from the intermediate step and the Krebs cycle. I mean, fascinating stuff here. So if you didn't catch it, here's what your table should look like. At the end of electron transport, we made 32 ATPs. We ultimately make 4 water molecules. And if you take a look real quick at this, we get how many? 36 net ATPs, 6 carbon dioxides, and 6 water molecules were all made in this process. And remember, this is from just 1 glucose, and of course we needed 6 oxygen molecules to get all this going. So just fascinating stuff. The biochemistry of a cell never ceases to amaze me, and I hope it never ceases to amaze you either. I'll see you then.